Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our class on the Teraphim. What were they? Why did Rachel steal them? We're going to be looking at some comparative stuff from Nuzzi, but we're also going to be talking about some different approaches. But we're going to start with the biblical text because the biblical text itself has kind of different views of the Teraphim. Okay. Now, I did want to tell people before I forget, this is an advertisement because I don't make any money. I don't make any money from the sales of this book, but my essay on evil and sin just came out in the Jewish Annotated Apocrypha. Cool. So, and I like to celebrate small victories, but it's nice. It's a really nice volume, and I was nice to be part of it. I also, an article of mine came out in Larry Schiffman's Festschrift, but I haven't gotten a copy of that yet, so I haven't actually seen it in the flesh. I've gotten the off print, but that's it. Okay, so with no further ado, I'm going to take one more quick view and make sure that everyone is here. It looks like they are. Yes. Okay, great.
Miriam, can we buy the book from you?
Can you? I wish. It's not. I literally get nothing. Can't sell it at a discount. Nothing. I don't think I could buy it at a discount and sell. But nice. Thank you for asking. I don't think so. I can ask, but I don't think that's the way it works.
Just give us info on how to get it.
Sure. Oh, you could probably. I'll bet you can get it through Amazon or Book Depository because it's Oxford, so it should be pretty available.
It is on Amazon.
Yeah, it should be. It's the sort of thing that would be. Okay.
I missed what you said.
So let us begin. So first, we're going to start with
I just wanted to ask what the.
I haven't said anything.
Did in it.
Oh, I did the essay on evil and sin. Oh. Yeah. So it's only an essay on evil and sin. I didn't do actually one of the Apocrypha in this one. But I got to write, just about evil and sin, which is my area of expertise always. So they need someone on evil and sin. They ask me. Yeah, look, it's a hard job, but someone's got to do it. Anyway, okay, so let us read our initial kind of story, right? Which is Rachel and the Teraphim, right? Where Rachel is going to abscond, right, with the Teraphim, and we kind of don't know why, and we're never really told why. All right, so let's take a quick look. I'm reading now from Breshit Lamed Aleph Yudalet. That's Genesis 31:14. And this is the thing. Yaakov has already said to his wives, "We're going to get up and go because I'm not being treated fairly. I legitimately got these, all these flocks, and my God promised me that He's going to do well with me. Let's get up and leave." And they answer. There's a reason why I'm reading this answer, because of course it provides possible motivation where motivation is hard to find. We read, "Vatam Rachel v'Leah," and Rachel and Leah answered, "V'tomar nalo ha'od lanu chelek nachala b'beit avinu." They said to him, "Do we still have a portion and a portion in the house of our father? Halo nachriot nachshavnu lo." He thought of us as strangers, because he sold us. Vayochal gam achol et kaspenu, and he's also going to eat up our money. Like that's he's so nasty with us that he sold us when that's apparently not what you do with daughters, and now he's going to take the bread out of our mouths. Kichol ha'osher asher hitzil Elohim me'avinu lanuhu ulevanenu v'ata kol asher amar Elohim elecha aseh. Because all of the wealth that that God saved from our father is for us and our sons, and now everything that God says to you, do. And in fact, they all go and they run, right? And it says, and I'm skipping now to Yutet, to 19. V'lavan halach ligzozet sono. Lavan went to shear the sheep. Nov Rachel et Teraphim that her father had. Vayignov Yaakov et lev Lavan Harami, and Yaakov literally stole the heart of Lavan the Aramean. Abli higidlo kivoreahu, because he did not tell him that he was fleeing. In other words, it's absolutely, you're absolutely meant to see the literary parallel, right? It's using the same word. Rachel stole from Lavan, Yaakov stole from Lavan, and Lavan's going to get equally upset about both, or similarly upset about both. Lavan, for both of them, it's this betrayal that Lavan's going to see it as a betrayal, and that's how he's going to behave. Okay, so Yaakov leaves without telling him. Which is actually, if you think of it, is pretty disrespectful. If you just take the idea is that Yaakov is genuinely worried that he's going to get into a major conflict over these flocks of his, right? He's seen that Lavan's getting kind of bitter. Lavan's sons are getting pretty angry, and he doesn't want to give anyone an opportunity to say those flocks aren't yours, and so he's running. But in a normal situation, you would kind of tell your father-in-law, hey, I'm going and I'm taking your daughters and grandchildren and all the flocks I earned from you. That's normally what you would say in the ancient Near East as well as today. You would say, right? That's a polite thing to do. And he does not tell him. Okay, so and Lavan finds out on the third day, and he goes and he chases him for 7 days. And God says to him in a dream, don't say anything. He says, Pin to the bear, don't say to from good to evil, don't threaten him, right? And Lavan catches up to him, and he says, and now I'm reading from Lamed Aleph Chavav 31:26. Vayomer Lavan liYaakov, Me'asita. Lavan said to Yaakov, what did you do? Vatignov et levavi, and you stole my heart, namely, which means you tricked me, snuck away from me. Okay. Vatinaheget bnotai kishvuyot charev, and you led my daughters away like prisoners of war. Right. And it's interesting, everyone is using these kind of, it's very interesting to see how everyone's pointing to the way the women are treated as proof of the man doing something. In other words, it's not as simple as saying, oh, these women have no rights. Well, they don't really have rights, but there are certain things that you can point to and say, you're doing bad. So they said, our father sold us like foreigners. And he's saying, you're just dragging them away without telling me, as if they were prisoners. Okay. Lama, now you could say they're kind of using them in their argument, but whatever. Lama nachbeta livrach. Vatignov oti v'lo higatali. Why did you hide the fact that you were going to run away, and you stole me? Again, you kind of stole away from me, as it were, and you did not tell me. Right? I would have sent you with joy, with songs, with a drum, and with a lyre. Right? I would have celebrated and sent you away, nicely, whether he would have not. Right? But that's what he said. Veloni tashtani. Nashek levanai livnotai. My son, goodbye. You have done foolishly. Yesh le'el yadi lasot imachem ra. I have the power to do bad to you. Ve'elohei avichem emesh amar elai lemor hishamer lecha midaber im Yaakov mitov ad ra. But your father's God told me last night, don't speak with Yaakov from good to bad. So you could say, well, you just gave him a whole speech. He didn't exactly shut up, but the point is he can't threaten him. That's what it meant. And he's saying, I could do really bad things to you, but your God told me not to threaten you. So I'm just going to have this almost threat kind of hanging there, right? Vata halo halachta ki nichsof nichsafta levet avicha. And now you have surely gone, because you have surely yearned for your father's home. Lama ganafta Elohai. Why did you steal my gods? That's the punchline, right? Okay, let's say you really missed, you're really homesick, you want to go home to your own father. I get it. First of all, you weren't supposed to sneak out. And second, why'd you steal my gods? Okay. Vayan Yaakov vayomer Lavan, ki areti, ki amarti pentigzol and penotecha meimi. And so he's starting first. He's now Rishon. He's answering the first question first, right? So he's saying, why did I sneak away? Because I was scared. Because I said, lest you steal your daughters from me. In other words, I thought you were going to keep your daughters from coming with me, and that's why I snuck away. Im asher timsat Elohecha lo yichye neged achenu haker lecha ma imadi v'kach lach. And whoever you find your gods with is not going to live. Like I'll just, that guy's a dead man. So I'm not responsible for stealing your gods. That person is responsible with his life. See what's with me and take it. V'lo yada Yaakov ki Rachel gnavatam. And he did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Right? So he just said the person who stole them is a dead man, and he didn't know that Rachel stole them. So Lavan goes through all of the tents, right? Yaakov's tents, his two daughters' tents, the two maidservants' tents, nothing. And he went out of Leah's tent and he went into Rachel's tent. So Rachel took the Teraphim, so she put them in the pillow on the camel and she sat on them. Okay, so apparently they're small enough to fit in that pillow and she can sit on them and he can't see them. Okay. And he felt through the whole tent and he didn't find it. But Tomer El Havia Al Yichar Ben Adoni Kilo Uchala Komi Panach. She said, please don't be angry. I can't get up in front of you out of respect, right? Which is what I should do. Ki derech nashim, right? Because I have my period. And he searched and he didn't find the Teraphim. Okay, and Vayichal Yaakov Vayarev Bilavan. And so now Yaakov's angry. Now Yaakov feels he can be legitimately angry. And he kind of reproved Lavan. Vayan Yaakov, Vayomer Lavan, and Yaakov answered and said to Lavan, Ma pish'i, ma chatati, what's my sin? Ki dalakta harai, because that you ran after me. Ki mishashtet kol kelai, you fell through all my stuff. Ma matzata mi kol klei beitecha, what have you found of any of your belongings? Simko neged achai b'achecha v'yochichu ben shnenu. Put them out. What did you find? Put it out among my brethren and your brethren. Let's all see what you found. Ze esrim shana anochi imach rechelecha v'izecha lo shikelu ve'eleit tzoncha lo achalti. He said, I have been with you for 20 years, and all that time, your lambs and your goats didn't die, and your rams, and I didn't eat any of your rams. I didn't bring an eaten animal to you. If you remember, this is also in Torah law, right? That if a shepherd is watching sheep and they're attacked by a lion, he brings the remains to the owner of the flock, and he's like, "Look, here it is. I'm not responsible because what was I supposed to do? Stop the lion? There was no way, right?" So he's like, I didn't do that. Like I just ate any losses that I had, right? Now what you already and you can ask from anything, anything stolen during the day or the night. And then you have a little glimpse into the life of a shepherd, right? Hayiti bayom achalati chorev v'kerch balayla v'tidash nati b'nai. What did he eat in the day? Had ice at night. He wasn't able to sleep. Such is the life of the shepherd. It's rough, okay? And he did this. Now, what we're supposed to also notice is the irony, right? He said, what did he say? And I really think it is, you are supposed to notice that he's using the same words. He says, Rechelecha v'yizecha lo shikelu. Your rechelim, your lambs and your goats didn't die right under my hand. who's going to die under his hand? Rachel.
Mm.
Lavan's Rachel. Lavan's Rachel is going to die while married to Yaakov. Not only is she going to die while married to Yaakov, but possibly she's going to die because of what? Because of his curse. That whoever took it should die, right? So you're absolutely supposed to kind of notice that. Oh, I have a request here, guys. Anyone who I can't mute you because I don't own this session. You DJ owns the session. If you can mute yourselves, unless you want to ask something, that would be good. Okay. Okay, so please, guys, mute yourselves. It's at the bottom. It should be at the bottom of your screens. Okay. I see a whole bunch of people unmuted. Guys, please mute yourselves. You don't realize, but when you make even a random noise, it puts you front and center. Okay, thank you. All right, and feel free to unmute yourselves if you have a question. Okay, so that's our story here. So what do we know about the Teraphim? What we know is that Bilam keeps calling the Teraphim his gods. Right? That's what he calls them. They call them his gods. No one's confused by this idea that these are his gods. Okay? That's what he calls them. We also know that Rachel stole them. We don't know the reason. It's possible that we're not supposed to be puzzled by this. Right? It's not clear why she did it, but it's also not explained, and it's not presented as a puzzle. Okay? They also seem to be small enough to fit in her pillow. She can sit on them. All right? Admittedly, I mean, if I were her father, I'd be like, yeah, you're having a rough time. Why are you sitting on a camel? That would be a question that I would have. But then the whole story wouldn't work, right? But okay, so that's what we know from this story. Okay, what do we know from the remaining references to Teraphim in the biblical text? So let's take a look. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of this. Excuse me. Let us take a look at the other sources that we have for Teraphim in the Bible. Now, of course, it's very easy to do this. You just get a concordance and you look through. By the way, a lot of biblical dictionaries are also essentially serve as concordances. They'll give you a list of different verses with different meanings. So it's very easy to kind of do this on your own, but we're going to do this together. So let's take a look at places where the Teraphim. So the Teraphim, one thing that Teraphim appear with a lot is the ephod. The problem is that the ephod, it's not clear what the ephod is. So let's do a second in a second. Let's talk about another story where the Teraphim. Actually, you know what? I'm first going to go to the story of Michal. All right. For those of you who remember, poor Michal. Michal is Saul's daughter, and she marries David, and she loves him. She is the only woman in the Bible who it says loves a man. I'm not saying like it says you have men loving women, right? Yaakov loves Rachel, but the only woman where it says specifically she loves a man, right? I assume in Shir Shirim, I assume in the Song of Songs, they both love each other. I don't remember the exact, but in terms of a character, is Michal. It's only Michal. Some people posit that that's because Michal is a masculine character. Michal is very assertive, and there are several places. There's one in particular, actually. This is one where she takes action in a very clear way, which is considered perhaps not very feminine. And that's why she can take the dominant role in that she loves the man as opposed to the man loving her. And of course, David does not actually seem to love her all that much, unfortunately. So if we look at Shmuel Aleph, 1 Samuel, Yud Tet Yud Gimel, that's 1913. This is, actually, let's start from 1912. This is Saul has gone to grab, he sent messengers to grab David and essentially imprison him, it seems like, and then to kill him in the morning. and Michal, and Michal says, I'm actually reading from Yud Aleph from 11, so it's Yud Tet Yud Aleph 1911. Vataged David, Michal ishto lemor. Michal, his wife, said to David, saying, Im encha memalet nafshecha halayla machar ata mumat. If you don't save yourself, save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. But toward Michal et David b'chalon vayelech vayivrach vayimalet. And Michal lowered David through the window, and he went and he fled and he escaped. But tikach Michal et Teraphim, and Michal took the Teraphim, but tasem el hamita, and she put it. You have to say here it's an it. It doesn't seem to be a plural, even though Teraphim seems to be in the plural form. It always appears as Teraphim. So it's like name is Teraphim as opposed to actually being a multiple. All right, and she put it on the bed. Vetkfir ha'izim sama mirashotav, and she put goat hair on at its head. But tichas bebagan, and she covered it up with a garment or perhaps with a blanket. Right, and so Shaul sent the messengers to grab David, right? And then he said to the messengers, go and see, go grab him from his bed, right? And then they go, and behold, it's just the Teraphim, right? So what what do we know from that? It sounds like the Teraphim is the size of a person. That's what it sounds like. Okay, it sounds like the Teraphim is the size of a person, that she can put it in the bed and they'll think it's David, right? And they'll think it's David, and then they will say, go away. She just has to put some hair at the head, and then it's going to look like a person. So that doesn't make sense because it doesn't fit in it wouldn't fit in the pillow by Rachel. That doesn't make sense. Of course, it could come in many sizes. There's also another theory which thinks that maybe it was a mask. Like just because we think of it as a little idol, it could have been a mask. And then a mask, you could say, well, she put it in the bed and then put some hair at the top. I kind of don't like it because it says mirash otav, as if there's a head of the Teraphim, like the Teraphim has like a head or something. Unless she's talking about the bed. I think it sounds like right, Susan. So that's what the theory would be, that it's a mask, because you'd have to be something that would be kind of idol-like, right? So it doesn't make sense that it would just be something the size of a head. It'd have to be something like a person that she would use to simulate a person. So if it were a mask, it would be something that could also fit underneath, or it could be, something you put at the head. I just like because of the language where it says she put hair mirash otav, like at its head. I feel like it's a bigger thing. But hey, so one of the theories as well, and actually Moshe Greenberg thought this, that what if it's a fertility idol? If it's a fertility idol, it makes sense that Rachel would take it. And it also makes sense that Michal would have one because we know she didn't have kids, right? So, because this is something that she clearly has right on hand. It's not a big deal for her to get it in a rush, and she can put it right away. So could it be a fertility idol? The problem is that, of course, we have a lot of texts in biblical texts that talk about the Teraphim as a divinatory object and not an idol. And then we have things that we can't really tell. So I'm going to start with the stuff we can't tell. The stuff we can't tell is stuff where it appears with the ephod. Okay, so if I look at, let's go to the another story, since that's more interesting to look at. So if we look at in Sefer Shoftim, in the book of Judges, at the story of Micha, that's the bad Micha, right? Who at the end, towards the end of Judges, he goes and he takes money and he creates a temple that's an illegitimate temple, and then the Danites, the people from Dan, come and just kind of rob him blind. And the idea, they take everything to have their own temple. And the idea is these people think that they're worshiping God, but really they're worshiping idols, and they're also being immoral, and they're being nasty to each other. And this is what happens when you don't have a king. That's really the idea. There's no king in the land, and that's why all this crazy stuff is going on. Everyone is in their attempt to create houses of worship. They're all being completely immoral. All right, not as bad as the very end of the book, of course, but still not good. So if you look in Shoftim and Judges, Yud Zion Hey 17:5, V'ha'ish micha lo bet Elohim, vayas ephod u'trafim, vayimale et yad echad mibanav v'hi lo lechohen. And so the man Micha, he had a temple, a house of God, and he made an ephod and trafim. And in the previous verse, an ephod and trafim, and the previous verse, it said he made a pesel u'masecha. So pesel is an idol, and a masecha is also some kind of idolatrous object made of metal, an image a metal image. Okay, so the previous verse he makes clearly idolatrous objects, and in this verse he's making an ephod and trafim. And later on, the ephod and trafim are taken from him. So what does this help that it goes along with the ephod? I wish it helped, but it kind of doesn't really. Why? Because we don't know what the ephod is either. All right. I know some of you are going like the ephod is the apron that the Kohen wears, right? The priest has an apron. It's called an ephod. We all read about it. It goes over the me'il. Yes. Okay. The answer to that is yes. Right. But other places where the ephod appears are not like that. Okay. Other places we have ephod appear. We have, again in Shoftim in the book of Judges, we have Gideon, who makes an ephod out of the captured jewelry. Here, I'll read it to you. I'm reading Chet Chafvav, so that's 8:26. Okay, and I'm going to continue to 27. So it says that Vayhi Mishkal. Actually, I'm going to go. The 26 is just about how he got all this golden jewelry. And then in Chaf Zayin, in 27, it says, Vayas oto Gidon le'ephod, and Gidon made it into an ephod. Vayatseg oto be'iro ba'ofra, and so he made and he presented it in his city in Ophrah. Vayiznu chol Yisrael acharav shan, and all of Israel, whored after it there. When do you use that sort of language? You use that sort of language for idol worship. It's very clearly meant to say this was an idol, and they all started worshiping it. And it was for Gidon and his house as a stumbling block. In other words, he created an idol. It sounds like someone unwittingly, he didn't really mean to create an idol. He meant to create, look I got the jewelry I won, look at what I did. And now it's an idol, right? So here the ephod is clearly an idol, all right? In other places, we have it being used in a clearly divinatory way. Now I'm talking about the ephod, not the Teraphim yet, all right? And that the classic example is with David, with David again. So if we go to, I want to make sure that I'm in the right place. No, this is not the right place, in fact. Hold on. So once David runs away from Shaul, okay, he at one point gets bread from the Kohanim of Nov, from the priests of Nov, and Shaul goes and wipes them out, and one priest escapes, and it's Eviatar, and he takes the ephod with him, okay? Now, exactly what is this ephod? Some say this is the ephod so there's an explanation, okay, right? So the explanation the traditional explanation is, well, this is the ephod, from the Beit HaMikdash, from the temple, and it had in it the Urim and Tumim, the Urim v'Tumim, and so therefore it could be used for a divinatory purpose. The problem is it doesn't say anything about the Urim v'Tumim there. It doesn't say anything about them. And I'm sorry, but the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel, knows how to talk about the Urim and Tumim. They are used when Yonatan is accused of breaking his father's oath, which he has in fact done. And that's in towards the beginning of the book. And we know from the Septuagint that they are used we have this very kind of muddled verse that only has the Urim, doesn't make sense. We know from the Septuagint, which seems to have the verse before it got all muddled, that the Urim and Tumim are being used there. And here we just have the ephod, okay? And we can also tell from the way it's used for divination. Urim and Tumim, at least in the beginning of the book, again, I realize that I'm building here on the Septuagint version rather than the Masoretic text so much, because the Masoretic text just has a verse that doesn't make any sense, and the Septuagint has a verse where Yonatan it's clear that they're using the Urim and Tumim to say, is it Yonatan or is it everyone else, right? So one way or the other, right? You have by here, you'll see that David thinks he's going to be able to get his standard answer because David has God on speed dial, right? So he's used to asking God all these long questions and getting real answers. You don't do that with the ephod; that doesn't work, right? So here I'm gonna read it. I'm reading now from Chaf Gimel Vav. Vayhi bevrach Eviatar ben Achimelech el David Keila ephod yerad be'ado. And when Eviatar, the son of Achimelech, ran to David to Keil, he took the ephod with him. In other words, essentially, Shaul heard, and now David is worried that he's going to that Shaul is going to attack. So he says to Eviatar, "Hagisha ha'ephod, bring the ephod." Okay, and now I'm going to read the whole question. Vayomer David, Adonai Elohei Yisrael, Shema Shema Avdecha ki mevakesh Shaul lavo al Keila. So excuse me, it's Keila. So David said, Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard that Shaul wants to come to Keila to destroy the city for me on my behalf, like in other words, to get me. Hayas giruni balei Keila biado hayered Shaul kasher shema avdecha Hashem Elohei Yisrael hagedna la'avdecha. Will the people of Keila turn me over? Will Shaul go down as your servant heard? O Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. And God said he will go down. Now we can see already what's happening here. David doesn't know how to deal with the ephod, so he asked multiple questions. You can't do that, right? You can ask one question and you get a short little answer, right? So he asked, "Are they turn me over?" And the answer was, he's going to come down. Okay. Then he learns, and he says, "Vayomer David, hayasgiru balei Keila oti vet anashai b'yad Shaul." He said, "Are they going to turn me over? Are they going to, essentially betray me?" Vayomer Hashem yasgiru. He says, "Yeah, they're going to turn you over." Okay. But so now we understand that the ephod is really an oracular tool. In this story, the ephod is an oracular tool. So in the Gideon story, it's an idol. He makes an ephod, it becomes an idol. In this story, it's being used as a way to ask God something, and you get a short answer. Okay, and ephod and Teraphim show up all over the place. They're used together. So let's take a. So let's actually take a look here. I think yes. Let me make sure that we've got right. Okay, so here in Hosea is a prophet in the nation of Israel. He is one of, if not the first book prophet. Academically, Amos is considered to be earlier. Traditionally, Hosea is considered to be the first, right? Because the way the book starts, God started speaking to Hosea, and so it's understood to be like that was when God started speaking, to prophets. This was Hosea, like as opposed to, like, of course, leaving Moshe aside. But it seems like Amos is earlier. However, Hosea absolutely is one of the earliest prophets, and he speaks to the northern kingdom. So the northern kingdom, things are a little bit more loosey-goosey than they are in Yehuda. And he says, and he's talking about, so I'm reading from Gimel 3:3, and then I'm just going to continue in Hosea again, which is in Treasar, right? Which is in the 12 prophets. V'amar ela yamim rabim teshvili, and I shall say to her, you shall sit for many days. Lo tizniv, lo tehila ish, v'gam ani elayich. You will not prostitute yourself, and you will not be for man, and so will I be for you. Okay, so that's that is God's relationship to Israel. He just told Hosea, go love some woman who's a loose woman, right? And he's saying that's like what I'm saying with Israel, but I'm telling you, Israel, you're not going to be loose anymore, but I'm also going to be faithful to you. Ki amim rabim yeshvu b'nei Yisrael en melech ve'en sar ve'en zevach ve'en matzeva ve'en ephod u'trafim. So because many days the children of Israel will dwell, and there will be no king and no minister, no officer, and no sacrifice and no matzeva, right? Which they're not allowed to put, right? They're not supposed to put next to an altar, but in the northern kingdom, who knows what they're used to? Ve'en ephod u'trafim. There's no ephod and no trafim. Okay. Achar yeshuvu b'nei Yisrael u'v'kshu et Hashem Eloheim. After that, Bnei Israel will do the children of Israel will repent and will seek out the Lord their God, right? Ve'et David Malkam, and David their king. Okay, so there's this idea that they're not going to have any kind of, and here you don't know. Is it talking about ephod and trafim as divinatory objects, as ways to reach out to the divine, or is it lumping them with all sorts of ways of worship? Okay, and you can't really tell. I'm going to skip now to some later books. Okay, and this is important, and it's important that to remember that these are kind of later. So we have a bunch of places like that where trafim and ephod appear together, and it's not clear in what sense. Are they divinatory, or are they meant to be some kind of somewhat idolatrous practice? Right. So if we look at Ezekiel, Chaf Aleph Chaf Vav, 21:26, we see Kiamad Melech Bavel El Em Haderech, and he's talking about the king of Babylonia is trying to decide what to do. Okay, and he's at the crossroads. Berosh Shnei Drachim, at the head of two roads. Liksom Kasem, to do like a magic, to do divination. Kilkal Bachitzim, he shook arrows, which we don't know exactly what this divination is, but there were some kind of divination they used to do with arrows. Sha'al Batrafim, he asked the Trafim. Ra'ab Kaveh, he did extispicy. He examined livers, right? That we know a lot about that practice. They examined livers like crazy, sheep livers. So he's using all the things you do for divination. What's one of them? Asking the Trafim. Okay, so here's very clear it's divination. Okay,
Miriam,
yes.
Could you give the reference again?
Oh, sure. That was Ezekiel, Chaf Aleph Chaf Vav, 21:26, and 21:26. That's the verse. Okay, and then if we look at Zechariah, now Zechariah again is also in the 12 prophets, and he is one of the prophets of the return to Zion. So he's one of the very last of the biblical prophets. Now we're talking a much later period, and he's talking about, this is the beginning of the Second Temple period. Ezekiel is the end of the First Temple period, and he's in Babylonia. And Zechariah is in the Persian period, the beginning of the Second Temple period. Okay, so Zechariah, Perak Yud, Pasuk Bet, so it's Yud Bet, it's 10:2. Okay, Ki hatrafim dibru aven v'kosmim chazu sheker v'chalamot hashav yidaberu hevel yinachemun. This is because the Trafim spoke falsely, and the magicians or divinators, or however you call them, foresaw lies, and dreams will speak vainly. So all of this is clear. These are all types of divination, and you can't trust them. They're all lying. Okay. So here the Trafim are very clearly a means of divination. All right. So here, on the one hand, we have things where it seems like, certainly in our story in Breshit, in Genesis, it looks like they're idols, right? And yet we have these other references where they seem to be divination, and we have others where we really don't know. We don't know what Michal is using Trafim for, or why she has them in her house. right? So what are they? Okay, what are the different? So let's take a look at one text that was considered a big kind of shed light on the Teraphim, and that's the text that I sent you as the handout, Nuzzi, the Nuzzi adoption law. Now I'm going to share my screen for just a second. I know you guys have the map, but I'm going to share my screen just so I can show you where Nuzzi is on the map. Give me just a moment. Here I am sharing it. Oh, that's okay. Screen 2. Share. Okay, so here you can see the map. All right, I'm going to put a spotlight on it, and this is Nuzzi. So if everyone sees where Nuzzi is in modern day Iraq. Okay, and it is, and this is stuff. Okay, so it was the way we're going to read it was published in 1927. Okay, so they discovered Nuzzi. They discovered archives. The Palace Archive actually had much less than the family archives did. The years for Nuzzi is 1450 to 1340 BCE. So you're talking the late Bronze Age. So that puts us before the Israelite kingdom, let's say in the range of, let's say, if we want to give it a biblical chronology, of the range of the patriarchs. Okay, it's in, if you ever look it up, it's in Mitanni, right? Mitanni is the name of like the state that it's in. The Hurrians is the name of the people who live there. Okay, it's a town in the kingdom of Arapha, right, which is right nearby. Okay. It's in modern language, it's near Kirkuk. Okay, it's right near the Tigris. Okay, so there you go. Now you know where it is. I will now stop sharing. Why is it not letting me stop sharing? Here we are. Okay. And now we're going to take a look at the text that people felt really shed light on this story. Okay, so if we look at the handout that I gave you, this is from Pritchard, and it says Nuzzi Akkadian. It's in Akkadian, and it says sale adoption. Now it's kind of interesting. Nuzzi had this very interesting set of laws, which okay, so let me put it this way. They weren't allowed to sell ancestral land, all right? So instead what they would do was they would adopt the buyer. So now he's my son, and now I can sell him the land, and the adoption agreement would involve the sale of the land. And adoption did a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in Nuzzi. So this is not exactly what I would call a sale adoption. There are real sale adoptions where you can actually see a family gradually selling off their land to someone with a series of adoptions of that person. Okay, but you also see things like what we have here is actually an arrangement whereby the son, quote unquote, will support the father until he dies, and then he'll inherit. Right, so it's really a kind of an exchange of goods and services rather than a real adoption. They had real adoptions, as you can see in the following text. They had some real adoptions of children, right? They also have an adoption which is essentially buying a slave. Like if you actually look at the terms, you realize they're calling it an adoption. What they're doing is they're buying this kid as a slave, which apparently also wasn't allowed, probably because of the kid's class. And they're calling it an adoption. So adoptions did a lot of heavy lifting at Nuzzi. Whenever something looks like an adoption, you have to really read through and see what is actually happening here. What's the actual deal? Okay. So here, what we have is the tablet of adoption belonging to Nashwi, the son of Arsheni. He adopted Wulu, the son of Puhisheni. As long as Nashwi is alive, that's the father, Wulu shall provide food and clothing. When Nashwi dies, Wulu shall become the heir. If Nashwi has a son of his own, he shall divide the estate equally with Wulu. But the son of Nashwi shall take the gods of Nashwi. However, if Nashwi does not have a son of his own, then Wulu shall take the gods of Nashwi. Furthermore, he gave his daughter Nuhuya in marriage to Wulu. And if Wulu takes another wife, he shall forfeit the lands and buildings of Nashwi. Whoever defaults shall make compensation with 1 minute of silver and 1 minute of gold. So we have a whole bunch of things going on in this document. The key, what was considered the key for our story, is that here you have a situation where if sons are born in this kind of adoption contract, notice the guy, so what are the parallels to Yaakov, okay? Yaakov, this guy is marrying the daughter, okay? Now, Yaakov does take care of Lavan's flocks, but it's a real business arrangement. In other words, when Yaakov takes care of Lavan's flocks, first of all, he's paying for the daughters, and then he makes the arrangement that this is what I get of the flocks in return for shepherding your flocks. So there's very little, there's no real adoption going on with Yaakov, at least not the way the story is presented at all. Let's say there were an adoption, right? So we could understand, you say, okay, so Lavan's adopting him. Then we hear about Lavan's sons getting upset that Yaakov's getting rich essentially off their father. What if there was a deal with Yaakov and then the sons are like, no, we're sons, he should not inherit? Because we already have this whole dialogue in the Breshit story, in the Genesis story, where the daughters are saying, he treated us like foreigners, he sold us, right? And then what if, right, Rachel wanted to show we are the real inheritors, we are the real continuation of the line, and so she stole the family gods, because now the original thing which I'm going to attack, as Moshe Greenberg pretty much showed how that's silly. The original thing was she's actually stealing the family gods as proof that Yaakov should inherit. In other words, as proof that Yaakov deserves these flocks, she's taking the family gods. Here we have the family gods. He's the real heir. As Moshe Greenberg points out, that wouldn't prove anything. On the contrary, all it would prove is that he's stolen the gods, right? Because what happens is, what's going on in our Nuzzi document is, this is a business arrangement, but if I have sons, the family gods will go to them as the true continuation of the family, all right? If I don't have sons, well then sure. But as the true continuation of the family is with my sons. You can split the property with them, but the gods have to go to the true continuation of the family. In fact, in other Nuzzi documents, the gods go to the oldest son. Okay, so what is it? So what Moshe Greenberg thinks is that she stole the gods simply because they were. What do you do when you leave? We have a later reference to that where Yaakov tells all the people with him, get rid of your foreign gods, right? And Josephus, and actually it's kind of interesting, Moshe Greenberg quotes Josephus. Josephus tells a story about these Babylonians where this woman took her home gods with her, right? And gets them kind of into trouble. And he's saying this is what people would do. What would they do in the ancient world? You're leaving to somewhere, you take your little gods with you, right? And so Rachel, what's the difference? Why did Rachel steal them as opposed to other people? Because they weren't hers. She didn't have her own, right? So she took them, and they weren't telling Lavan that they were leaving, right? So she took them on the sly, so that was stealing, right? And that's why, Moshe Greenberg thinks that's why it doesn't have to give you an explanation, because it was such a normal thing to do. It was such a normal thing that to take your gods with you when you went, and Rachel didn't even think much of it. She took gods with her when she went, and that was stealing, and Lavan got really upset about it, and then he went after them. Also, he does posit maybe these were fertility gods, and she wanted to take them with her also as fertility gods, and that would be why Michal had them in her house, because she also didn't have kids, and she wanted some kind of fertility gods. That's why I'm going to share my screen for a second. Oh, here we are. Okay. I'm going to share my screen for a second, and I'm going to show you this. Here, so for example, you can see these Judean pillar figurines that at a certain point, I remember that at the Bible Lands Museum, they actually showed these with the verse about Rachel's taking the Teraphim above them. Yeah. It's not true there anymore. It's not true, and it hasn't been for quite a while. I remember that at the beginning, that's what they did. Now, my memory could be wrong, but that's what I remember. They changed it probably for two reasons. It was probably very offensive to religious people, and it was probably also not particularly academically correct. In other words, yeah, you want to say that these fertility figurines are like, because they're nice, they're little, they're small, right? You're like, oh yeah, and Rachel needed a particular fertility figurine, but then why is Lavan calling it my gods? Like, why, if they're her fertility figurines, I don't think that Lavan would be saying, and you stole my gods, right? It makes more sense if they were the household gods. So why would Rachel steal them? You could still say, well, she was stealing them just because they were the household gods. She's going on a trip, but there's actually an interesting article by, I want to name her, Kitsia Spanier. It's interesting because I read this article as a little baby master's student, and I was like, oh yeah, wasn't there an article? I was like, yeah. So Kitsia Spanier says she says that it's not a thing that Rachel is not doing. I'm just going to take a quick question from Moshe. Says Moshe Matitya here is asking, how can Greenberg say that what Rachel did was a normal thing when the narrative, not just Lavan, refers to it as theft? He's saying that what was abnormal was the theft. In other words, he's not saying it was normal to steal. He's saying that sure, the normal thing would have been to take the idols, right? But she was stealing them, right? However, what he's explaining is why doesn't the Bible need to tell us why in the world she would do that? I'm not sure we're supposed to understand. I don't know, right? But if you think that we're supposed to understand this as a normal activity, then the normal activity, in the ancient world, people take their idols with them. They take their gods with them, right? But the problem is they weren't hers, okay? Possibly because she didn't have any, because she's Yaakov's wife, right? That could be a really good reason, right? If she's Yaakov's wife, especially his favorite wife, and he hangs out with her a lot in her tent, maybe she doesn't have idols on hand, right? But now she's traveling, what's she going to do, right? So, he doesn't say that the stealing is normal. He's saying the stealing is the only abnormal part. Taking it with her is not abnormal. The stealing is the abnormal part. And I have, according to the Nuzzi text, would it follow that if Lavan did not have sons, the Teraphim should have passed on to Jacob? That was the original thought, was that what is Rachel doing? Rachel is saying, no, he's the true heir, just the same way that they were saying before, Lavan has rejected us. He should have treated us as children. So she wants to say, yay, he should have treated us as children. And this is going to kind of represent that. Actually, and again, the people that Moshe Greenberg is arguing against actually think that she was using it as proof. That would be, that as he points out very well, that would be silly, because if the guy has sons, that if she has the household gods, they're stolen. That's the only way she could have them. Lavan would not give the household gods outside of his birth family. It doesn't matter to me what the arrangement was. Okay. So so Danny and Libby say, when we were kids in grade school, they told us Rachel's intentions were pure. She was trying to save her dad from idol worship. Good point. That's in the Midrash Rabbah, and it's brought by Rashi. And in the Midrash Tanhuma, and what Ibn Ezra says, is the Teraphim are used for divination, and she was worried that Lavan was going to figure out where they were going, right? So that's why she stole the Teraphim. I like that explanation. I like either explanation, right? It would explain, I think either explanation explains why she really doesn't want to give them up, right? But now going back to, because I was in the middle of saying what Kitsia Spanier says, that she said that Yaakov doesn't know that Rachel's taken it. So if she wanted to do something, was showing something about Yaakov's descendants, and Yaakov doesn't even know, like, what exactly has she achieved. So her argument is that Rachel wants to show her supremacy over Leah. In other words, that I'm the one who has kind of the house, as the household gods, I'm the one who my children are going to lead. Now, my children are the ones who are going to lead. And if you read it in the context of like Israelite history, right, you say that there's that constant tension between the children of Rachel, meaning Ephraim, and you could say Shaul, who's from Binyamin, right, and the children of Leah, specifically Yehuda, right? So that would be like a kind of a foreshadowing of her wanting her children to be ahead. It's hard to kind of swallow. but there is a lot of bad blood between Rachel and Leah. What's harder for me to swallow is the role that idols play in this whole game, right? From Yafa Shochet. Was it normal for an adopted man to marry the adopter's daughter? It seems like sibling marriage. Exactly. They actually have things that in Nuzzi, that it was very common to actually to have someone adopt the bride before she married. They would like to create a sibling marriage by adopting someone. I don't think that they figured out why, but this was actually a very common arrangement that it was like they had to adopt them even and create this kind of sibling marriage, or that it was better somehow. It may have had to do with if they were of different classes or something. But again, this adoption is really a fake adoption. It's an arrangement. It's, you're going to take care of me until I die. You're going to provide food and clothing for me. In other words, you're going to support me until I die, and then you get my stuff. Right. And meanwhile, you're going to marry my daughter, and you forfeit if you marry. Now, this is also interesting because Lavan says to him, if you torment my daughters, or if you marry anyone else, I'm coming after you. Right. And I'm gonna get you. And here in the Nuzzi document, it also says, I'm pretty sure it's in this one. Right. Yeah, it says, and if Wulu takes another wife, he shall forfeit the lands and buildings of Nashwi. So that's also an issue here, where part of Wulu being able to inherit, and in this it's actually a little bit clearer. I should say in the Nuzzi document is clear, because in our text, in our biblical text, it really seems that Lavan's just kind of looking out for his daughters. He's like, if I hear that you're tormenting, you're mistreating my daughters, I'm going to be really upset, and I'm going to come after you. Whereas in the Nuzzi document, it makes much more sense as kind of an inheritance thing. Like, I feel better letting you have my inheritance, you're inheriting from me, that as long as you're married to my daughter and you're not taking some other woman so that you can completely take my land out from my bloodline, right? So that's a certain amount of sense in that context. Inheritance. So we're talking about why would Rachel take it. So we have this idea, we have the traditional ideas, right? Which is one, to want to save Lavan from idolatry. Two, Teraphim are used for divination, and she was worried that he was going to find out where they were going. It seems like he was able to find out anyway. And then the kind of the academic approaches, which are all talking about them as kind of household gods. What would she have achieved by taking these household gods? There's a very kind of weird theory by Van der Toorn's thing called that they're actually like the spirits of the dead. He doesn't really have anything to base it on. In other words, like it's like ancestor worship kind of thing. But there's very little to base that idea on. But we still don't. So that's the idea that Teraphim are idols. But if the Teraphim are idols, then what about all the places later on where they're really being used for divination? They're really being used for really only as oracles, as we see particularly in Yechezkel, right, and Zechariah, where there's very clear they're only being used for divination. And I think here I read an interesting article which may shed a little light. I'm not sure if we really need it, but there's an interesting article by Sean Flynn where he wants to draw a parallel to Egyptian Shabtis. So a Shabti, they look like, do I have it open? Yes, I do. I'll just share this for a sec. Here we are. Just a second. So Shabtis are those little Egyptian guys who are, you can see them here. So these are Shabtis, right? They get buried with the dead, and they have, if you look and you see here, just a second, let me get my little spotlight. Okay, so you see there, these ones are holding whips, okay? So he's holding whips because he's an overseer. And he's an overseer of the other little servant Shabtis, because when the dead person is called upon to serve, these Shabtis are supposed to say, here I am, and serve in the place of the dead person. The overseer Shaktis are called also Osiris figurines. They also represent Osiris. They also actually represent the dead person himself, and they represent these servant spirits that are supposed to serve instead of him in the afterworld. And they know a lot about them because they actually have the script on the Shaktis saying what they're supposed to do. That when the dead person is called to service, they're supposed to say, "Here I am," and do all the service that in the place of the dead person. And so Sean Flynn says that, well, look, here you have Shaktis filling different roles, Osiris figurines representing the dead, representing servant spirits, all at the same time. So can't you have Teraphim also representing different things at the same time? I would say they don't even necessarily have to represent different things at the same time. They can represent different things as things develop. So for example, when you've got in the story in Breshit, in Genesis, they're idols, right? It's very clear everyone's treating them like idols. Okay, it's very hard to say. Now it could be that they're also used for divination, because if they're asking those gods you can use for divination, it's likely a phode, where there's a theory that the reason that the ephod becomes an idol, quote unquote, is because because they had these idols that had these metal kind of war armor then what they would do is they would just represent the god with just kind of the armor apron, the metal apron, right? And that's a theory, right? But the idea being that here you have things that at one point they represented gods, and maybe they're look like a little bit like people, and then at a certain point, maybe this thing that looked like a person, it was already, people forgot about the idol aspect of it, and they didn't care about the idol aspect of it. This was just a way to ask God stuff. Now, how you would do it, I don't know, right? But it's perhaps meant to be like a person who's interceding with you with God and asking, right? Because it's assuming that it looks like a person, right? But it became simply used for divination. And then we can understand it because the places where it's clearest that it's being purely used for divination are the later books, are not super late, right? But Yechezkel, again, who's at the very end of the First Temple period, right? And also he's out in Babylonia, where where they're using a lot of divinatory practices. And we have Zechariah, who is at the very beginning of the Second Temple period. And both of them are speaking of the Teraphim as completely divinatory, so that anything, the idolatrous, the purely idolatrous aspect of it has simply faded away. Now it's just another way of trying to figure out what to do and what's the best thing to do. And if you think of it as asking the gods or asking the God, right? It doesn't matter. That's what you use the Teraphim for. So I'll wrap up. That's pretty much my wrap up, but I'll do another wrap up, and I'm going to pause and for comments and questions. There's some I didn't get to earlier. So Susan said maybe the pillow was in a tent, not on the camel at that point. I like that idea, that the pillow wasn't actually on the camel. It was just the camel's pillow, and she took it and she put it inside, and then she sat on it. I like that. That actually makes more sense, because he says he left Leah's tent and went into Rachel's tent. So why does it say that? That actually makes the most sense. So thank you. Here from Dina Altura, Jeremiah 31:21. In the future, a new creation will be made. The woman will go around the man. Yeah, there's a lot of. Don't get me started. Like someone once asked me to give a class to a bunch of 18-year-old girls in a seminary about women and women standing in the Bible. And I was like, you don't want me to give that class. That's not something, I'm not big into apologetics, and I tell it like it is, and they're not going to like to hear it. I'm not saying that women don't have, I think that in the stories of the Torah, in the stories of the Bible, women are absolutely characters. They absolutely have agency. And I think it also points out that what we read in legal texts, including in ancient Near Eastern legal texts, yeah, that may have been once they got to the court, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what daily life was like for women. In other words, yeah, they may have not had many rights in court, and their fathers could sell them, whatever, all sorts of things. But it doesn't mean that in life, a young woman was never asked, "Is it okay? You're fine with marrying him?" Like I wonder. It makes you kind of question these legal texts when you have these stories where women clearly do not only have agency, but we really feel. I always feel so. You feel so much for Rachel and Leah. It's so clear that they've been put in a horrible situation, with no attempt to say, "Oh yeah, this was really good because it would give Yaakov more kids." No, it's horrible, right? And they suffer, and everyone suffers, and that's not hidden from you. So on the one hand, you have these stories where women really have a tremendous role, and are real characters in their own right. And on the other hand, let's face it, like, why do we only know about Dinah? Why is Dinah the only daughter that Leah has? The answer is because we have to learn about Dinah's birth because she features in the story later. We don't have to learn about anyone else. Does that mean she didn't have any other daughters? No, but who cares? We care about the sons. We want the sons, right? And I'm not even getting to the laws, right? So don't look for women's, for women's rights. Don't look to the. I do think, and I've said this before. Sorry for going into a bit of a tangent, but I'm not a huge fan of feminist readings, but there are times. But when I read the verse in Micah, right, in Micah, that says that Bnei Israel were led out of Egypt by Aaron, Moshe, and Miriam, I understood why the feminists were like, they're hiding things from us, right? Because in the story of the 5 books, right, of the Pentateuch of the Torah, Miriam is not a huge, she's a character, but she's not, she wouldn't say we were led out of Egypt by Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. But it's very clear that is in fact what people say at the time of Micah, and that there are a lot of stories that they know that we don't get to read. So that's my little addition. So are there? That was a real tangent. Are there any other questions before I wrap up? This is your chance.
Was there any protective element of this that Rachel wants to protect Yaakov from her father using the idols against him, from loving them as divination and to hurt Yaakov, and she's being protective of him?
Well, I mean, if the reason is like the Midrash Tanchuma and Ibn Ezra, that she's stealing them because they can be used for divination for him to find Yaakov, then it's very clearly a protection of Yaakov. Mm-hmm. Would there be a reason for her not to tell Yaakov? I don't think that it would be like if she didn't. This is what I wonder is why was she unable to predict that Lavan would react as strongly as he did? Because what interests me always is if this is something that's culturally, they're all from the same culture, mm-hmm. and Lavan's reacting very strongly to her taking these Teraphim. Why didn't she foresee that? I mean, that gave him a real incentive to catch them, it seems like. Like, he's like, not only did you sneak out, you stole my gods. Why did she not see that it was going to be that big a deal? And clearly she feels like, it seems like she realizes that at this point, he better not find out it was her. Like, it's not going to save her that she was his daughter, right? Like, she realizes he better not find them in her tent, right? Or whatever in her tent. Right. And because it's going to be really not good if he does. So the question is why is there such different, you would think that she wouldn't do this thing unless it was a kind of what do you call it? Something your nose. What do you do when you like that at her father? Like, ha 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 ha, we're running away. Right. Thumbing your nose, yeah. Like, haha, we're not only going away and taking all our stuff, I'm taking your gods because you treated us so badly. And it does seem like both she and Leah feel that they were really mistreated and disrespected by Lavan in terms of the way he behaved in the whole marriage thing, right? Which we have not heard earlier, right? Before, we only heard kind of Yaakov's perspective on how it was to be tricked and then have to serve another 7 years. And here we're hearing a different side of it where this is apparently not culturally okay. It's not okay for him to sell them the way he did, right? And his daughters are still angry about it.
There's a part of the Yaakov story where he's always obtuse about the effect that his actions are going to have on others. And it seems maybe both of them are being obtuse.
I don't know. You mean he and Rachel both? I mean, yeah. I mean, I think you're right in that it doesn't seem like she understood the impact if she did what she did, right?
And Yaakov do this with the sheep and not realize that Lavan is going to be angry at him.
Oh, I think he didn't care about that. That part.
Mm-hmm.
That part was like, how do I get rich now? Well, this is a way. I mean, honestly, like he's this is the thing with Yaakov is that he's got his eyes open enough that he sees when Lavan's starting to he's like, oh, Lavan's not acting the way he used to act with me. It's time to run. Okay. So he's got that much of he says like, you know what? And then he knows he better run. Like, I don't know. We will never know. Lavan seems like a tricky guy, right? So we don't trust what he says. Oh, I would have sent you away and did a party and da da da. We can't trust a word he says. We already know that, right? Because he's a really tricky, kind of slimy guy, right? So but it's very possible that Yaakov really read the situation correctly, that he had to make a run for it, right?
There's a bit of a parallel here, it seems, with the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, in terms of both the livestock and the Teraphim. When Bnei Israel sacrifice the lamb, which is sacred to the Egyptians, and they're getting all this livestock as gifts that they're to add insult to injury as they're leaving Egypt. So
right.
There seems to be a bit of a parallel.
Well, they don't get. I think they don't get the livestock as gifts. I think they get the like silver and gold stuff as gifts.
They don't get. Okay. Right.
They borrow because it's stuff they can borrow. It's stuff that they can borrow, which is like the dishes and stuff. So that's what they get for that. But it is true that it is absolutely parallel, particularly in terms of the 3 days, right? It takes 3 days for Lavan to find out, and there's the 3 days before Paro starts chasing them, right? Because they're supposed to go 3 days into the wilderness, and so you have that parallel, and you do have the parallel of you're sneaking out because there's this. We forget, right, that when Paro says I'm letting you go, he's saying I'm letting you go to sacrifice to God, and then you come back and be slaves again. That's what he agreed to, right? And they have zero intention of coming back and being slaves again. So yes, in that way, it's absolutely parallel. That not only they run away from Paro, they're not coming back, and also they take stuff, right? So you could absolutely find a parallel there. Anyway, so we see that it's interesting to look at Teraphim in general with many biblical objects that we actually kind of don't know what they are. It's always interesting to look in the biblical text and then also see what's going on in the ancient Near East to see how we can kind of use that to shed some further light, but without it overshadowing the way the actual word is used throughout the Bible, because a lot of times that's really what we're looking at. Finally, I'm hoping I was thinking next week to do, because I was reading the Nuzzi stuff, I was thinking of doing what is it called? The land, the kind of the Shemitah and Yovel rules as you have in the ancient Near East, the kind of not exactly wage slave, but kind of the land slave situation, the situation of tenant farmers, wage slaves in the ancient Near East, what we see there and compared to what we see in the biblical law, not just in biblical law, but in biblical story, right? Because in biblical law, you have a regular period of time. In biblical stories, we see where the ruler steps in and says about the wage slaves, you got to release them. It doesn't matter. Debt slaves in the ancient Near East, and debt slaves in biblical law and biblical story. So I thought that would be interesting to do. Is everyone cool with that?
Yeah.
Not seeing enough nods.
No,
Okay, good. Great. Okay, terrific. So I'll see you next week. Looking forward to it. Yes.
One last comment.
Mhm.
In the history of anti-Semitism, it seems almost not a coincidence that they refer to us as Bnei Israel, because it seems in many ways that Yaakov is the quintessential double-dealing Jew that the Goyim love to hate.
Indeed. And I even left stuff out. You could really go through the story and kind of show it. Even though I do like the point that I forgot his name, the guy who wrote Odysseus' Scar. Did you ever read that essay? So Odysseus' Scar compares biblical narrative and Greek narrative, particularly Homer. And he talks about how Odysseus doesn't change, right? How long is he making that journey home? Like 30 years, something like that. He starts out as a young, vital man. He gets there as a young, vital man. He doesn't change at all. Yaakov, we see him as this kind of cowardly younger son. And then he gets to be kind of a little bit sneaky, and he's kind of doing things with he's maneuvering with his father-in-law who he doesn't trust, and with his brother who he doesn't trust, and then he has to deal with his wife, and then he's a doting father, and he's not making the best decisions for his family, and then he gets to Egypt and he's like, I'm old, and also I haven't lived long enough, and everything sucks. So he's this old guy, this crotchety old complaining guy, where you really see the development of Yaakov over the years in a way that you don't in, let's say, Homer's narrative, but it's fun to see with Yaakov, actually. But good point. So have a good night, everyone, and I'll see you in a week. Looking forward to it.